The Edge had always been a refuge for those who lived on the fringe of civilized space, a battered truck stop clinging to the rim of the Orion Arm. It wasn't glamorous, but for a space trucker like Captain Jet Karrigan, it was home enough. Today though, she wasn't here by choice. Jet's freighter, the Wayfarer, coasted into dock, trailing sparks and losing power fast. She could feel her ship straining, almost as if it were tired too. A slow exhale escaped her lips. 30 years of navigating the stars, hauling cargo from one hostile outpost to another, had taken their toll on her body, her spirit, and now on her ship. But if there was one thing Jet understood, it was the necessity of pushing through. Legends never rest, she muttered, patting the Wayfarer's control panel like a faithful steed. As she climbed down from her freighter, she was met by the scent of burnt fuel and the clang of metal echoing through the open repair bays. Young Benji, the station's newest mechanic, looked up from under a fuel pump, a smudge of grease across his cheek, eyes wide with barely contained awe. He'd heard stories of Jet Karrigan, the iron ghost of the trade lanes they called her. She had single-handedly taken on pirates, flown through asteroid fields blind, and delivered on contracts others considered suicide missions. Captain Karrigan? Benji stammered, practically buzzing with excitement as he wiped his hands on his coveralls and hurried over. "Just call me Jet, kid," she said, her voice roughened by years and space dust. She brushed past him, her gaze flickering over the bay's security cam, a habit she'd picked up after too many close calls. "And I need a tune-up on my NAV systems, maybe a refuel?" Benji's face fell slightly, like a child whose hero turned out to be just another person, yet he rallied quickly. "I could get you set up with a full diagnostic. Can't believe it though, the Jet Karrigan. My dad used to tell me about the time you took down a whole crew of Harlovian pirates by yourself." Jet cracked a wry smile. "The thing about legends, kid, they get a lot prettier in the telling." She leaned against the bay wall, crossing her arms. "What happened was I barely got out alive, with a hold full of damaged supplies and a hull half ripped open. But if it makes for a better story over a drink, well, so be it." Just then, a heavy hand clamped down on her shoulder. Jet tensed, instinctively reaching for the pistol at her hip, but then recognized the deep chuckle that followed. "Still quick, huh, Jet?" It was Marshal Riggs, a retired Earth Marshal turned bartender and semi-official gatekeeper of the Edge. He flashed her a familiar, weathered grin. "Saw you come in hot. Thought I'd welcome you to our cozy haven." "Nice to see some familiar faces around here," Jet replied, her tone softening. Riggs leaned closer, his voice low. "I'd say it's nice to see you too, but word has it you've made a few enemies lately. You heard anything about the bounty the Frackle Syndicate slapped on your head?" Jet sighed. Of course, the rumors had traveled even out here. The Syndicate had never forgiven her for blowing the lid on their black market operation during a routine haul to Proxima Outpost. Exposing them had cost them millions, and they didn't let grudges go easy. "Let them come," she replied, jaw tightening. "I'm not exactly in the mood for visitors, though." Riggs chuckled, his eyes gleaming. "Let's just say you're not the only one with a stake in keeping this place secure. Besides, I've got a reputation too, remember?" The two shared a silent understanding. Legends like them didn't come here to hide. They came here to catch their breath between fights. But Jet knew Riggs' warning was no small talk. The Syndicate wouldn't send just anyone, they'd send their best. She'd have to be ready. As Jet headed toward the bar with Riggs, Benji trailed after them, desperate to hear more. The bar was a dim, smoky haze, filled with the low murmur of truckers and drifters sharing stories. Jet could feel their stares. A few nodded in respect, some even raised their glasses. Legends didn't often come through here, and she knew that the glint of awe in their eyes was as much curiosity as reverence. Benji slid into a seat beside her, practically vibrating with questions, and she couldn't help but smirk. "All right, kid," she said, raising her glass as the bartender slid a drink her way. "Here's to long hauls, rough landings, and surviving one more day." They clinked glasses, and for a moment, Jet let herself believe it was just another stop, another night. But she knew better. Legends like her didn't rest even at the Edge. The bar at the Edge was dimly lit, with a low hum of conversation broken only by the occasional clink of glasses and laughter. Captain Jet Karrigan settled into a corner booth, nursing her drink as the familiar scents of old leather and engine grease wrapped around her. Marshal Riggs joined her, his hulking figure easing into the seat across from her. "You're a hard woman to find, Jet," Riggs said, his voice rough but warm. "Word travels faster than light these days, especially about that stunt you pulled on the Frackle Syndicate." Jet shrugged. "They had it coming. Someone needed to expose their smuggling ring, and I was already hauling supplies out that way. It was just, convenient? Riggs chuckled. Convenient or not, you're on their hit list now. He leaned forward, his tone dropping. I hear they've sent the Fong brothers after you. Jet went still. The Fong brothers were infamous bounty hunters, ruthless, efficient, and known for never letting a target slip through their claws. I was hoping they'd leave this place alone, she muttered. Riggs glanced around the room. They don't care about the sanctity of the edge. They want your head. If they catch wind you're here, there'll be blood. Just as he spoke, the bar doors swung open and a hush fell over the patrons. Jet turned, her eyes narrowing as she spotted two hulking figures framed in the doorway. The Fong brothers had arrived, their reptilian skin gleaming in the low light, their slitted eyes scanning the room. They wore armor plated with jagged edges, designed to intimidate as much as to protect. Stay calm, Riggs murmured, his hand subtly sliding under the table. If we're lucky they'll just have a drink and move on. But Jet knew better. She'd spent a lifetime reading the eyes of those who lived on the edge, and the Fangs weren't here for a casual drink. They were on the hunt. She leaned back, hiding her face beneath her cap's brim, but her hand drifted to the blaster at her hip. The brothers moved slowly through the bar, their eyes sweeping over the tables. When they reached Riggs' booth they stopped, fixing him with a glare. We're looking for someone, one of them hissed, his voice low and threatening. A certain captain with a tendency to cause trouble? Riggs didn't blink. Lot of captains pass through here, he replied, his voice steady. If she's here maybe she doesn't want to be found. The Fong brothers exchanged a look, then nodded toward the bar. We'll be waiting, the taller one growled. They moved away, taking up seats that still offered them a clear view of the room. Jet exhaled, her heart pounding. How long do you think they'll wait? Not long, Riggs said. If you want to slip out the back, now's your chance. Jet shook her head. If I run they'll track me. I need a plan. Riggs considered her, a glint of respect in his eye. You've always had guts, Jet. Just be careful, legends don't last forever. She gave him a grim smile. Neither do Fangs. Together they began to strategize, knowing that escape was no longer an option. Jet's hands were steady on the controls as the Wayfarer shot out from the edge, the engine humming through her seat like a heartbeat. Next to her, Benji sat strapped in, his eyes wide with barely contained excitement and nerves. Jet hadn't planned on taking the kid along, but when she'd found him stowing away in her cargo hold with a pack full of tools and enough guts to look her in the eye, she decided he might be more useful in the cockpit than underfoot. Ever done a haul like this, kid? Jet asked, glancing sideways as Benji's hands gripped the edge of his seat. Not exactly, he admitted. I just thought maybe I could help. Learn a few things. Jet smirked, keeping her eyes on the stars streaking past the cockpit window. Well, if you're looking to learn something, pay close attention. We're not the only ones out here tonight. Just as she spoke, the radar on her control panel pinged, a warning blip at the edge of her sensors. Jet's jaw tightened. The Fong brothers hadn't given up after she'd slipped out of the edge. They'd simply switched to more familiar territory, tracking her ship through deep space like wolves on the hunt. Who's following us? Benji asked, his voice low and tight. Bounty hunters, Jet replied, her voice calm as she assessed the situation. They're called the Fong brothers. Syndicate hired them to collect on me. Smart, ruthless, and they don't scare easy. Benji's eyes widened. So what's the plan? The plan, Jet said, flicking a series of switches and feeling the Wayfarer surge as she diverted power to the thrusters, is not to let them catch us. She pulled the ship into a hard turn, aiming toward a dense asteroid belt on the horizon. Hold on tight, Benji. You're about to get your first lesson in evasive maneuvers. The ship shuddered as they entered the asteroid field, massive rocks hurtling past on all sides. Jet's focus narrowed, her grip steady as she wove the Wayfarer between the debris, her movements precise and practiced. Behind them, the Fong brothers' ship followed, agile but struggling to keep pace. Watch how I time each turn, Jet instructed, her voice steady even as her eyes stayed locked on the swirling obstacles ahead. It's all about rhythm. Move too soon and you're toast. Wait too long and you're just as dead. Benji nodded, his face a mix of fear and awe as he clung to his seat. This is insane. That's trucking on the fringe, Jet replied. Nothing's ever simple out here. They'd almost made it clear of the belt when the Fong brothers fired, a burst of plasma flashing past them and grazing the Wayfarer's rear thrusters. The ship lurched, alarms blaring, but Jet kept her focus, pushing the throttle to its limit. With one final maneuver, she angled the ship into the shadow of a massive asteroid, cutting power to mask their signal. The Fong brothers shot past, unaware, still hunting in the wrong direction. Jet exhaled, releasing the tension in her shoulders. She glanced at Benji, whose face was pale but alight with something fierce. "You still think you want to learn this trade?" she asked. Benji nodded, his voice full of newfound respect. "Absolutely." "Good," Jet said, grinning. Lesson 1, Legends don't run. We just get smarter. Back at the edge, Jet and Benji limped into dock, the Wayfarer bruised and battered but still holding together. The chase through the asteroid field had taken its toll, and despite her best evasive moves, the Fong brothers had managed to land a few hits before they finally broke away. The two bounty hunters weren't ones to give up easily. Marshal Riggs was waiting in the bay, arms crossed and a grim expression etched on his face as they stepped out of the freighter. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Jet. The Fong brothers were just spotted outside the station. They know you're back." Jet gave a weary sigh, but there was a gleam in her eye. "Seems they're dead set on getting that bounty. Guess we'll have to give them a proper welcome." Riggs's gaze flicked to Benji, who was trying his best to look composed despite his pale face and the streak of grime across his cheek. "You up for this, kid?" Benji nodded, his voice steady. "I'm not running." A flicker of respect crossed Riggs's face. "All right then. Here's the plan." They gathered in the back of the repair bay, the three of them huddled around a schematic of the Wayfarer and the docking bay layout. The plan was simple but risky. Riggs would lure the Fong brothers into the main bay, where Benji would trigger the docking bay's force field to trap them inside. Jet would be waiting in the shadows with her blaster ready, to end things once and for all. When the Fong brothers finally arrived, the heavy footfalls of their armored boots echoed through the bay. Jet pressed herself against the wall, hidden by the shadows, her blaster drawn. She caught a glimpse of Riggs stepping out, waving casually to get the hunters' attention. "Looking for someone?" Riggs called, his voice taunting. The Fong brothers turned, eyes narrowing, and charged in. The second they passed the threshold, Benji hit the control switch, and the force field snapped into place with a sharp buzz, sealing them in. The brothers realized too late, spinning to see Jet emerge from the shadows, her blaster aimed squarely at them. "Didn't think you'd be so eager for a rematch," she said coolly, her voice echoing off the steel walls. "Should have known better than to chase a legend." The taller Fong snarled, his hand moving to his weapon, but Jet was faster. She fired 2 clean shots, each blast striking true and dropping the brothers before they had a chance to react. Silence fell over the bay, broken only by the faint hum of the force field. Jet lowered her blaster, exhaling slowly as the tension seeped out of her shoulders. Riggs gave her a nod of approval, while Benji stared at her, all written plain on his face. "You're not just a legend," Benji whispered. "You're unstoppable." Jet cracked a tired smile. "Legends don't rest, Benji. Not out here." She patted the hull of the Wayfarer, already thinking about her next haul. After all, there was always another job, another stretch of stars to conquer. With a final glance at her crew, Jet strode back to her ship, ready for whatever waited beyond the edge.